Today in Flex in the City, we talk with Robert Van Kerkhoff, BNP Paribas Security Services Luxembourg, Regional Head of Luxembourg, Ireland and the Channel Islands. Join us as we discuss the vulnerability and the importance of balance and humor in financial services. All that happening right now in Flex and the City.
Hello everybody, this is Rachel Treese for Flex and the City. And today I have the very, very great pleasure of interviewing Robert Van Kerkhoff. Robert is the MD of BNP Security Services here in Luxembourg. And he's also the regional head responsible for Luxembourg, the Channel Islands and Ireland. And Robert is the first Dutchman to appear on Flex in the City. It's a pleasure to have you here, Robert.
Hello, thank you very much. Thank you very much for inviting me. So
you're very welcome. I'd love to find out a little more about you.
Well, so I will start. Hopefully, I will have interest some people listening to this broadcast. So I'm Dutch indeed. I'm married, got 2 kids. I'm living, let's say, in 2 different places at the moment. So I'm working in Luxembourg and I'm commuting every weekend to Madrid.
In these times, that must be challenging, Robert.
I don't recommend it to anybody, but that's the current situation, and it is. I think it's also a bit, the red line in my career, in my life. So I've been in different countries. So I started my career in the Netherlands at the European Option Exchange. It's already a long time ago. I talk here about 1995.
Okay.
I took the decision to go to Madrid.
Okay.
And I think if you look, across the career, I think this was one of these moments where you kind of get to know yourself. So when I left the Netherlands, that time I was working as a risk manager in a trading company, and thought that Spain was a kind of also waiting for me with open arms. Because I did a nice study, I had a good background, quite some expertise in options and derivatives. But then when I arrived there, it was quite a big disappointment and also a kind of frustration, because you suddenly find yourself in a country without speaking the language.
Okay.
Trying to sell yourself in interviews that you have an added value, and you're almost not able to do that. And then you start to understand, how vulnerable you can be, and when certain things fall away. And I think that was a moment for me, which was tough. And I kind of, got to know myself a little bit better. And that's what most of the time what is happening when you go abroad. Your weaknesses become more, I think, clearer. And that is something that I learned. So also the kind of, how immigrants can feel is something that I felt myself when going to Spain. I think the other moment, I'd say because when I was in Spain, I stayed there for a couple of years, then went back to the Netherlands, and then went back again to Spain for quite a long time, where I became the COO of Fortis Bank. And as everybody knows, Fortis Bank was taken over by BNP Paribas. So that is also the reason why I finally ended up at BNP Paribas. At that time, with the takeover, I was the COO of Fortis and part of the country management team. So that was was a pretty nice position. But, the takeover, the acquisition of BNP Paribas was not really about Spain, because that was much more collateral. It was more about Belgium and Luxembourg. So you can imagine that when in Spain, the management of BNP Paribas was looking at the management of Fortis Bank, and they find there a Dutch guy working in Spain, they kind of had a question, so what is he doing there? So I think that was another moment. What for me was difficult. In the end, BNP Paribas, they took the risk and they gave me the chance to start within their organization. I have to say that it was a kind of starting bit all over again, because at that time, what I said before, as a COO, I was responsible for around 120 people, and I went back to 3 persons that were under my responsibility. But I think when you kind of believe in yourself, and I think also a little bit, my fighting mentality, that helped to kind of overcome that. And afterwards, via a period in Paris, where I stayed for 3 years, then went back to the Netherlands, and now here in Luxembourg. I think I also have shown, also to the people within BNP Paribas, that it's possible to, also when you are taking over, to make a career. And this is where I am at the moment. So I'm happy with the role, and also kind of proud of, let's say, the whole steps that I've taken, in my career.
Yeah. So thank you for sharing your vulnerability about your journey. What do you think that vulnerability and that self-awareness has brought you as a leader, Robert?
I think it's very important because in the end, I think some of the people see vulnerability as a weakness. I actually see it as a strength. I think that especially I think now in this time of COVID, I think everybody has experiences that are difficult. I'm not even talking about, that people that have family members that passed away, but also, and all kinds of other things. You're not able to see your friends anymore. You don't see your colleagues anymore. For people, it is difficult. And I think as long as you talk about it and also talk openly about that to your colleagues or to whomever you trust, I think it's something that is good for everybody. It's good for the organization, and it's a strength. Emotions, is something that's part of the human being. So let's talk about it when something is not going wrong and when people are suffering.
Absolutely, it's all about emotion in the end, isn't it?
Correct.
Absolutely. Correct. So what motivates you? You've got a very demanding role. Is there some core values behind that? Some purpose behind all of that? What really drives you, Robert, to do the role that you do?
Yeah, it's a good question, Rachel. So for me, I think if I start with the first answer to this question is people motivate me. I've clearly, during all these, let's say, these years and being in different locations, different cultures as well, it's very interesting because in the end, yes, there are different habits, different cultures, but in the end, and every person is different. So that's that I found very, very interesting. So together defining a vision, together defining a strategy. This is when I arrived here in 2019 in Luxembourg. One of the first things I did, after a couple of months, is to really to gather most of the people, managers, experts, young talent, and try together, to define that strategy going forward and try to transform that organization. This is what really drives me. Then what I like is that, and I think it's also a little bit perhaps the question and also the advice sometimes that I have is that in my position you are able to influence. I'm not saying that you can decide on all the matters because we are part of a big organization that is with also of course a strong governance internationally. I'm part of that governance. But sometimes what people forget is that you are able to influence, and sometimes you can do much more than people think. What for me is the difficulty, but also the challenging part and the interesting part is there are a lot of factors and a lot of components during the day coming to you, from operational topics to organizational changes to whatever topic that comes to your table. You can decide in the end what is the topic you think are relevant for your organization. Sometimes it's a trade-off. You cannot do anything at the same time. But I think it's that, and sometimes these are counterpowers. So you talk about, for example, a lot about cost these days. That financial services, you need to look at the cost side, but at the same time we want to grow. So how are you going to do that? How are you going to also to bring the people with you? Because if you start to look at costs, the people then start to have a feeling that perhaps you bring the organization in a difficult situation when there are capacity constraints. And I think this is what is interesting, and this is what I like about what motivates me.
Very good. So I'm sure that in your life there might be a world leader or somebody who might have inspired you. So who's the most inspiring leader you know, and why? And has there been a financial services leader also who might have inspired you?
Yeah. So let's start with the let's say the inspiring leader. There are a lot. There are a lot of inspirational leaders, but I would choose Winston Churchill. Why? I will try to tell you what. I think he was ballsy, courageous, fair, competitive, and also funny. Then he had that moments of politically incorrect, bold in his statements, but he was also sticking to his vision and concentrating on the bigger picture. And I know these elements that I just explained to you is what I like, right? It's we also in the financial industry sometimes I still see a lot of governances, a lot of political correctness, where sometimes we can a little bit more bold, right? And I think also the funny element is extremely important. And I come back, to the situation we're currently in. COVID. I mean, everybody is a kind of suffering in this moment. And so these components of being funny, but also making sure that you're fair, courageous. It's courageous. Sorry, it's these are things for me. These are elements that are very important. And as a leader, well, of course, you're not on the level of Winston Churchill, but this is something that inspires me.
You can sleep in bed, so you can work from bed. Winston Churchill famously used to work from his bed every morning. So. And have a brandy as well. So
brandy next to it. Yes, I know. It's and then you asked me the question around the financial services. Which perhaps the person I'm going to mention to you is less known. He's somebody at BNP Paribas. His name is José Placido. Mm-hmm. He's currently running our CIB activity in the Americas. And apart from that, he is a very strong communicator. The knowledge of financial services, that is all there. But I think again, it's much more what attracts me is the humanity that he has, and he shows emotions. So that makes him an authentic leader and also charismatic. And again, coming back to what I said before, people see sometimes vulnerability as a weakness. Now, clearly, when I saw him on stage a couple of times, and I know him personally very well, is I see it as an enormous strength, and which also is attracting people, and people are following that. And that is what I like about this person in particular as a leader.
Fantastic. And so that leads me on to ask, what skills do you think, Robert, are going to be needed by our industry in the next 5 years?
For the next 5 years, that's
a long time.
that's a long time. I think if you look at our industry, it's becoming more technical, right? And we talk now a lot about new technology. It's everywhere. So I would say that the technical side is growing, and tech savviness is something that is important, and also for young talent, it's clearly a plus. Looking at the data, which is we talk a lot about data, and about this is the center of our strategy. Data for our clients is extremely important. The way we are reporting to our clients. So what I see and what I think is important is that the person who can connect the world of business with the world of technology, this is for me where the future is. So if I could now make a bet on future profiles, I would say this is clearly where we will see in the future the added value of a person, because most of the time it's scarce to see somebody, it's rare that you see somebody who has both sides of that equation. But if you have it, I think it's a clear plus. And then I think also, if you look at the younger generation, what they are looking for is it's much more around purpose. They look at, and we talk, and I will hopefully, I don't know the questions you're going to raise to me, but I really would like to talk more about our responsibility as a bank in the area of sustainability, of our ESG, our corporate responsibility, right? I think this is very important, and I think also the younger generation is looking at that work-life.
So let me ask a question about your own children. You have teenagers, I understand, Robert.
Yes.
Do they know what you do, and what is their view of our industry?
Yes, I got two teenagers, correct. My daughter, she's 16. My son is 18. It's kind of funny because last week, actually, we were talking with my kids, with my daughter in this situation, and I asked her, so do you know what I'm doing? She said, yes, you're working in a bank, right? And said, yeah, but what exactly am I doing in the bank? Well, she looked at me and she gave me the face of, I really don't care. So my son, he's extremely interested in animals. So he's now 18, and most probably he's going to the Netherlands. I think he's going to study animal science. So there is a kind of parallel, right? That sometimes the zoo in the financial market and his world of animals. So that is but I would say they are not really interested in the financial industry, and I think it's fine. I'm not really to kind of pushing that. They have their own interest and they need to make their own lives, and so I'm following that.
Yeah, but what do we need to do as an industry to attract young talent?
It's a very good question. I think what will happen anyhow already, it is. I mean, we are in COVID and we see already the acceleration in a lot of topics. When we look at the digitalization that is happening, when we look at the way we communicate is changing completely with our clients, with our employees. So it requires also, let's say, some other talents, right? Talents, or at least and some other needs. If you look at the industry, I think also what is changing is that before the banks and the financial companies, they were doing everything themselves. They were a kind of autonomous and very isolated and didn't open themselves. So I think this will, and this is a trend that I see as something that is happening and will only grow. So what is happening now is that we are having much more joint ventures. To give an example, very clear example. So we had our fund dealing services. Mm-hmm. So when there are clients who are buying third-party funds, we did it ourselves. So we have a joint venture with Allfunds Bank. So we're kind of becoming a platform of other connective platforms. And what does that mean is that, of course, there is more of an importance around technology, but at the same time, it's also opening your culture and opening your way of. And I think that is what is attracting also the younger people. So that have that, let's say, that more of an openness, and also makes, I think, your ecosystem more interesting.
Absolutely. Which leads me nicely on to diversity and inclusion, which I know is really important to you, Robert. So what does it really mean for you, and how do you think diversity and inclusion affects the performance of your organization?
It is, and I think it also has to do with with probably because I'm so much kind of focused on that because of my past, right? If I go back to my childhood, actually. I'm talking here about the 70s. So if there are younger people listening, they say that's an old man. But it's my mother, when she was a mother of three children. I have two sisters. She started her own shop. She was very entrepreneurial, and in the 70s. And at a certain moment, for her it was very difficult, a lot of pressure because it was not something common. So she was also, of course, the wife of a pretty conservative father, and then that that entrepreneurial side where she need to run the shop. So she decided at a certain moment to transfer that, to sell that. And when we were a little bit older, again she started another company in the Netherlands, which actually, and I'm very proud about that, which is. Although she passed away, it's still going on. My sister still runs that business and pretty successfully. And that's kind of already. So I've been brought up by pretty strong women. So for me, it was, and now we have initiative here at BNP Paribas and Mix City, for example, where we're really trying to push, the position of the women in the company and at BNP Paribas. But for me, it's a kind of, a given. When I looked and how I was raised. So when we have initiatives like, for example, we have an initiative just recently where the executive committee here in Luxembourg and also at the bank level, they sign it off. It's called Jamais Sans Elle, where we when there is a panel with more than 3 persons, there's not a woman participating in the panel, we will not participate. And it's okay. I mean, it's you can say, is that then that important? It's much more of a signal. And what we are concretely doing now is we are giving also women trainings. To make sure that thought leadership is not limited to a certain gender, but that we give the opportunities to everybody. So if I talk about, and this is now, let's say, a very concrete example of gender, but I'm a really strong also kind of believer in diversification in the widest form. So also from an age perspective, So we need to have, I think in the end, when you facing new stuff, new periods, you need to have a team with the right balance of talent, age, gender, and nationality. And I think that is vital if you want to run a business. And that's how I also try to run it here in Luxembourg.
Fantastic. So I'm now going to give you the power to have a magic wand, and you can be the fairy godmother of financial services. So if you could wave that wand, what would you change, Robert?
What could I? Wow, that's another very good question, Rachel. So I think what I would like to change is the profit focus. That should not be the sole leading factor in our business. And perhaps it's an open door as well. But what I think, and we have a responsibility I think also at this moment when we are look for, and come back to COVID again, there are a lot of companies that are suffering, especially now when as I'm living in Spain. I see that there are a lot of companies currently where people in a temporary unemployment, they have problems with funding. I think also there financial institutions play a role there. So that is one. And then if you look at at the energy transition, if you look at that kind of, we're trying to have a low carbon economy. So this is important. It is now that we have to take the decision. So last week, BNP Paribas joined the Net Zero Banking Alliance. And this alliance mobilizes the financial sector for the climate ahead of COP26. This takes place in Glasgow. And I think it's a little bit in line what Jean-Laurent Bonnafé, as our CEO, is saying, that it's a race against time. And I really think about that. So the banking and the finances sector, we have to be at the forefront of the establishment of let's say, of this kind of funding that transition in that energy, that low carbon economy. Because if we don't do it now, our next generation will suffer. And I think this is where our industry needs to go faster than what they're doing now. And also, again, perhaps sometimes we need to be a little bit more bolder than what we are sometimes at this stage.
Yeah, so bring a bit of Winston Churchill into the industry.
That would be lovely.
So I got my final set of questions, Robert. You're very busy. You're looking after 3 countries. You're flying back to Spain during COVID time. You've got a family to manage. Do you have any free time? And if so, what do you do in that free time?
I think that's indeed my big challenge in life. So how to kind of keep the balance, and it's important because it's stressful. It has a price. If you have these kind of you live these kind of lives where you are commuting a lot. And obviously, sometimes there are stress moments. So it's very important that that at a certain moment you have these moments that you don't have. At least that's how I think. That you don't have to think. So I'm trying to jog a couple of times a week to at least to keep myself fit, to keep the body fit. That is important. Mm-hmm. But also, if I have time, I'm spending. And I do very stupid things in the garden, but only to the fact, to kind of not having to think and also, to be in nature. I love that. And then when my kids to let me, because I'm pretty horrible with the guitar, I try to play a little bit of music on the guitar, and that keeps me kind of relaxing in life. That is important, and let's say at this stage, I'm kind of keeping the balance, but I also have to admit that I'm from a work-life balance. I'm not a good example, and I definitely not to recommend people to follow this lifestyle. But it's for me, it's the way I try to keep the balance.
So I think, in summary, we need to bring more balance to financial services industry. Robert Van Kerkhoff, thank you so much for joining us on Flex in the City. It's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, and hope to see you soon again. Thank you.
You just listened to Flex in the City. Catch us on our next episode.